is James, and I'd like to welcome you to part 6 of my continuing series where I'm sharing about my personal study and practice of Cartomancy with playing cards. We've been exploring the individual cards over the last few installments, and in the previous installment I talked about all the 4 cards, so I explained what the 4 means for me in terms of associations that I have with it, and then I explained my meanings for all the 4 cards. In this video installment, we're going to pick right up where we left off. So now we're turning our attention from the number 4 to the number 5 and all the 5 cards. So in the next segment, I'll be taking a closer look at the number 5 and the meanings that I have for it and some of the things that I associate with the 5 in terms of symbology. And then moving from there, I'll take a look at each of the 5 cards and I'll share what my meanings are for them when they turn up in a reading. The deck that has been assisting me throughout this video series is one of my favorite standard deck of playing cards, and that is the Tally-Ho playing cards, specifically number 13 in the series. And the reason why I like this one is because it was designed by Jackson Robinson of King's Wild Project. And so now, without any further ado, let's move into the next segment and take a closer look at the number 5. And here we are with the 5 cards in the deck, and for me, 2 themes that I immediately think of with a 5 card are change and activity. For me, the 5 can symbolize the hands or the feet, if you think of 5 fingers and 5 toes. So some of the things that I think of with the 5 are being hands-on, getting a handle on things, or having a hand in the situation. 5 can also represent the physical or the material world. So those are some of my other associations. And with that, I also think of the senses, and I'm thinking about the 5 senses. That would be seeing, touching, hearing, tasting, and smelling. And then because of the 5 physical senses, I come up with this idea about things being sensual or having some sensuality. Now, just like I mentioned that the 5 can represent the hands and the feet, the 5 for me can represent the symbol of a star, and that's a 5-pointed star. And going with that, the top of the star can represent the head, the sides of the star can represent the hands, and then the bottom points of the star can represent the feet. So it can also symbolize man and his physical body. Now, going back to my numerology days, because that was the first metaphysical science that I took on, the 5 can represent travel and freedom. So I also associate those with the number 5. Now at this point, I'm going to be sharing some of my popular phrases or pop culture references when it comes to the number 5. So some of those are 5 o'clock shadow, pleading the 5th, 5 golden rings, the 5-finger discount, a high 5 or gimme 5, working 9 to 5, the expression take 5, meaning take a break. Another expression is 2 and 2 make 5. And this is the throwback. You know, I love my old musical references, so another reference could be the Jackson 5. And then one of my popular phrases from one of my beloved TV shows, Mission Impossible, is where the person would always tell Jim Phelps, "This tape will self-destruct in 5 seconds." So those are my associations and phrases for the number 5. And at this point, I always encourage you, when it comes to the number 5, what do you think of? What personal associations do you have for the number 5? And those associations, those references, those phrases could become part of your meaning overall for all the 5 cards. And so now at this point, we're going to move on, taking a look at all the cards one by one, starting with the 5 of hearts. And first up, we have the 5 of hearts. And if you remember, the suit of hearts for me can represent feelings, emotions, relationships, and healing. And with that in mind, some of my first go-to meanings for the 5 of hearts are emotional changes, feelings change, or changes in a relationship. And because the 5 can represent hands, I also think of hands-on healing, and that is because I'm a Reiki practitioner, so that is a personal association for me. And with that in mind, the 5 of Hearts can also represent any kind of healing activity, because the number 5 can also represent being active and activity. The 5 of Hearts can also mean an offer or an opportunity. This card can represent feminine energy, and with that, it can represent a female friend or relative. Another meaning for this card is seeking better circumstances. And along those lines, the 5 of Hearts can also mean a dream coming true. Now, playing with the physical aspect of the number 5, the 5 of Hearts can also represent physical displays of affection. And one of its commonly held meanings is this idea of holding hands. And then the last thing that I want to say about the 5 of Hearts is that it can represent the right hand or the right foot. And so now let's move on to the next card, the 5 of Clubs. Next up, we have the 5 of Clubs. And if you remember, for me, the suit of clubs can represent work or business. It can also represent social and social activity, and also progress being made. So going with that in mind, for me, this card can mean a change in work and or business. I tend to think of this as the job change card. It can also turn up when someone is contemplating going back to work after being home for some time. And in that regard, I call this the going back out into the working world card. In keeping with the work and job aspect of the suit of clubs, the 5 of Clubs can represent a job interview. Now, keeping with the hands and physical aspect of the number 5, the 5 of Clubs can also mean working with your hands. And with that in mind, I tend to think of physical and manual labor. But it can also represent working out or exercise. And still playing on the physical aspect of the number 5, this card can also mean competition, and it can represent sports or sporting events. And again, because the number 5 can represent the hands, I tend to think of the 5 of Clubs as organizing or reorganizing something. And because the suit of clubs can represent progress, the 5 of Clubs can turn up in that regard to mean re-evaluating accomplishments. And then the last thing that I want to say about the 5 of Clubs is that it can represent social activity, because again, the number 5 represents being active in activity, and the suit of clubs is about being social. And so now let's move on to the next 5 card, the 5 of Diamonds. And here we are with our third 5 card, the 5 of Diamonds. And if you'll remember, for me, the suit of diamonds can represent material concerns, material matters. My first go-to is I tend to think of finances and money. It could also represent power and energy and success. So with that in mind, some of my meanings for this card is that it can represent financial changes or financial activity. And keeping with the money aspect of the suit of diamonds, this card can mean that money is changing hands, or this idea about handling money. Now, because the 5 can represent the physical and the material, this card can mean property other than the home, because if you remember, the Ace of Hearts is a card for me that can represent the home. So this would be property other than the home, and that can mean some kind of land. Now, bringing this back to the money aspect of the suit of diamonds, this card for me can represent shopping and spending money. So I tend to think of some kind of expense with this card. Now, shifting gears a little bit, another meaning that I have for this card is that it can represent a court case that's pending. And along with that, it can also represent any associated documents or paperwork. So without getting too terribly legal here, you could think of things like petitions, briefs, summons, affidavits, or notarized statements with this card. Now again, because the suit of diamonds can represent the physical and material, and the number 5 also represents the physical and the material, the 5 of diamonds can represent physical changes and physical activity. And then the last thing that I want to say about the 5 of diamonds, playing on the idea that the number 5 can represent the senses and things being sensual, this card can represent the finer things in life. So some ideas with that would be good food, good wine, fine clothes, etc., etc. And so now let's move on to the last 5 card, the 5 of Spades. And here we are with the last 5 card for this video installment, the 5 of Spades. So now if you remember, my associations and meanings for the suit of spades are problems, challenges, obstacles, hurdles, and difficulties. So keeping that in mind, my first go-to meaning of the 5 of Spades is handling a problem and or difficulty. This card can turn up to represent a divorce, a split, or some kind of separation. It can also mean ending matters once and for all. Some other meanings that I have for this card are, it can turn up when one is being forced to cope with one's own problems. And along those lines, it can also mean being forced to stand on your own 2 feet. And because the number 5 can represent freedom, I call this the becoming independent card. But it can represent this idea about independence being gained through some problem, challenge, or difficulty. The 5 of Spades can also mean breaking away or breaking free, if you go with the idea that the number 5 can represent freedom. And because the suit of spades for me can represent cutting, the 5 of Spades can represent cutting someone or something out of your life. Now again, because of the cutting aspect of the suit of spades, the 5 of Spades for me can represent holding a knife or a cut hand, because the 5 can represent the hands. And since I talked about the hands, this particular card can represent the left hand, whereas a card that we talked about earlier, the 5 of Hearts, was the right hand. The 5 of Spades is the left hand, and with that it's also the left foot. Now keeping with this idea about the left, this card can also represent being left-handed. So in addition to the left hand, it can also represent somebody who is left-handed. And then for me, because I like wordplay and phrases, the 5 of Spades can also turn up to represent something that comes out of left field. And then the last thing that I want to say about the 5 of Spades is that this is a card that can represent surgery or surgical procedures. And there you have it. We've talked about the number 5, and I shared what themes I have for the number, as well as any references, pop culture associations, things like that. And we also explored all the individual cards, and I shared some of the meanings that I have for them. And that will bring this video installment to a close. We're now halfway through the pip cards, or what we call the spot cards. And in our next video installment of the series, we'll take a look at the number 6 and all the 6 cards. So until then, this is James Himm Mitchell. I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this video installment, and I look forward to sharing the next video installment with you right here in this space. So until then, take care and have a great day.